Welcome to FNT, Functional Neuro Talks, with Precision Brain Center.
Hello, welcome back to our podcast. My name is Elena. This is Dr. Gabella and Dr. Blake. They're back here with us. So today we will be talking about exercise and how that's not just important for the body, but also for the brain.
Absolutely. It's a fun topic too. So in general, movement is so therapeutic for the brain, and we get this question quite a bit. And there's a couple areas that we'll go ahead and deep dive into. But a lot of people consider going to exercise or, walking around the block as just being something that's beneficial for your health or your weight or cardiovascular function, but it's actually super important for the brain. So some really great research that has come out more recently shows that aerobic exercise, 15 to 30 minutes, 3 times a week, so very minimal. When we're talking about aerobic exercise, we're talking about having our heart rate up for that extended period. So for some people, that aerobic exercise might be, just high intensity walking and maybe body weight with things. Other people, it might be more hardcore using weights and a HIIT type of thing. So it depends on, what is your health? And ultimately, it's to be in that safe heart rate zone. And that you're not also developing symptoms, because we do know in the world of neurological disorders, people do have exercise intolerance. But so what the research shows is 15 to 30 minutes of aerobic exercise 3 times a week allows us to have hippocampal neurogenesis. So what that means is by having this aerobic exercise for 15 minutes, I'm going to create increased cell mass within our hippocampus. So you're saying, what the heck is the hippocampus? Why is that important? Well, the hippocampus is one of the most important places in the brain. One of the reasons it has the highest rate of stem cells in the brain, and also it's our area that is involved in our memory, okay? So as we're born as a child and we're figuring out the world, we're creating these templates of our world, it's the hippocampus that allows us to do so. It's involved in the working memory process, short-term memory, and long-term memory storage. And ultimately, our memories dictate our behavior, dictates who we are as people, and leads into our personality. So super important area of the brain. But then it's also, again, really important with the stem cell function it has. And for us to keep it healthy, so when we're looking at healthy aging and optimal aging, the area of the brain that's really impacted in these neurodegenerative disorders is going to be your hippocampus. So you have the Alzheimer dementia patient, either way you shake it, they'll have different pathophysiology and maybe different symptoms, but they're all going to have that cognitive decline and memory loss. So we really want to keep an eye on that and make sure that's nice and healthy. And we can easily do so with aerobic exercise. So how fun is that? It's great, simple, easy. A lot of people might have questions on specificity. I would say don't overthink it. Do your best, get your heart rate up for that 15 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week, and you're doing excellent. So the next thing we could say is, why is movement important for healthy aging? Okay, so we know as we get older, one of the highest risks that we have are the risk of a fall. And here's why. If you have a fall, there's a high likelihood that you hit your head and you have a concussion, and then you're put into the hospital and you end up developing this comorbidity, and then all of these different disorders present all because that concussion happened as we were aging. So if we can prevent people from having falls, they age so much better, and it limits the amount of comorbidity, meaning it might even limit them having a cardiovascular crisis, or it might limit some organ failure that would present because there was a concussion added on top of any underlying condition. So we really look at that with all people, because when you injure your brain, it has a high likelihood it's going to injure your balance system, but we definitely want to look at that in the elderly population, and also even in your 50s, because your lifestyle choices in your 50s, they tend to typically stay the same as you go into 60 and 70. And so if you're making good lifestyle choices, you're doing balance exercises, you're working out, you're moving, you're probably going to stay that way into your 60s and 70s and on. Dr. Blake, do you want to add anything into That?
Yeah, definitely. I think so too, that when we're talking about movement and exercise, it doesn't have to be anything super, super intense. So it's not like you have to be training for a marathon or triathlon, very intense training. It can be as simple as Dr. Gabella was saying before, 15 minutes a day, aerobic. And you don't have to get to a run. It's more so about your heart rate, putting your heart rate in that range to induce that anaerobic exercise. And it can also be very low impact workouts. So I know Pilates is becoming a lot more popular nowadays and very low intensity workouts. That's also a great thing for movement.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go back to more of the sciencey stuff as to, hey, why is balance, why is movement super important, and what areas of the brain are involved in such thing? So to start, to get a nice solid foundation, I'm going to break down where in the brain things fire to allow us just to stand upright, right? So if I get up and I'm standing, I'm on a flat surface and my eyes are open, my brain is using my vision, it's using my vestibular system, which I'm going to point to my ear, but it's not hearing at all. People typically think of that. In the inner ear, we have an area in there that's the peripheral vestibular apparatus. Semicircular canals are in there. We have the sacral and neutricle. That area is what senses gravity and movement of our body in gravity. And there's acceleration forces and all that stuff. So it could be a tilt, a pitch back and forth. It could be a rotation of the body. It could just simply be me translating upward. When I stand up, I translate upward. Gravity's firing down, activates my otoliths to say that I'm translating upward. So that's the vestibular system, and it fires centrally in the brain with all these central pathways. We have our eye movements mapping out our world, telling us, hey, I'm upright, or hey, I'm tilted. And my vestibular system is saying I'm tilted. My vision is saying I'm tilted. Well, I'm seated right now, so I'm not really using so much proprioception. But as soon as I stand up, I'm using my vision, my vestibular system, and now I'm using proprioception. I'm sure you're saying, what the heck is proprioception? So joint proprioception. I move my joint. I have to have a receptor in that joint. It's a mechanoreceptor that says, hey, she flexed her wrist. So it's going to fire to my brain to help control the muscles of flexion and extension of the wrist. As soon as you move a joint, you're getting mechanoreceptors of the joint. We also have proprioception within our muscles. So when a muscle activates, we're activating these muscle spindle and this joint proprioception so that we know where our limb is in space. So I stand up, I'm using proprioception, which is my muscles, my joints, and then I'm using my vestibular system and my vision to do so. So then we're like, okay, how can we find out, since all three of these sensory systems are working together to allow us to move and have balance, do I have an area that's less efficient than another? So you'll hear this all the time. People will say, yeah, I injured my brain. Let's say they didn't even injure the brain. They just have a little ADD, maybe some cognitive decline, and they want to come in and they want to become sharper cognitively. And one thing they mention is, yeah, my balance is really good, except at night when I get up to go to the bathroom. I notice like I'm really unstable and I don't feel comfortable in my environment. I can't tell where I am and I have to use a nightlight or I have to turn on a light to see where I'm going. So already that says to them, they think my balance is great, but their balance isn't great because the second you take away vision, it's dark in a room, they don't have their vision, right, to tell them where they are in space and how to move in that environment safely, they feel unstable. So that means that they're upregulating their visual system for their balance function, which also means to say there's either something wrong in their vestibular system or there's something wrong in their joint proprioception, okay, knowing where their body is in space. And so they have those little moments of not feeling so stable. Or a patient will say, yeah, like when I'm at the beach, walking on the beach, or, maybe they're at the gym on a foam pad and they're stepping on it. They're like, my balance is really good, except when I get on a foam pad, I feel terrible. Or when I'm at the beach, I maybe get dizzy or I feel unstable. Well, the beach is a soft sand, if you've ever walked on the beach. It's we call it a perturbed surface. It means it's not a flat, solid surface. So now all of a sudden patients are unstable. And so what that means is they're upregulating their proprioceptive system. So they're relying more heavily on joint proprioception, their muscles and joints, to know where they are in space and to move in their environment. The second you make that system more difficult, you challenge that system, you're now saying, okay, how's my vision doing and how's my vestibular system doing? Obviously, in that patient reporting that, either their vision is aberrant, like their eye movement. When I say vision, we're not talking about blurry vision or, decreased vision, but eye movements itself, because the eye movements are what's mapping out our environment that we interact in. And then our vestibular system. That's going to be problematic if a patient challenges their proprioception with the perturbed surface and they get worse and they don't feel stable. So it's really cool when it comes to the brain is we can break this down to say, where is this going wrong? On top of that, if you've ever tried to walk down the street and maybe do a cognitive task, you start with 70 and subtract sixes or count back by threes, something that requires a little bit of cognitive thinking. If you're a math whiz, we can't use that example. We'll have to use something else for you. But it's just this, get your cortical, so that's the higher up areas, your frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital area that's involved in cognition working. Because really, our cortical areas should not compensate or should not be too much involved with our just walking normally, right? But if our system for walking normally, balance, and movement is disrupted, all of a sudden we go to think and walk at the same time and we freeze or we sidestep or we lose our balance and we're not stable. And you see this in the elderly. Shouldn't happen. I should be able to think all day long and it doesn't impact my ability to walk and move. So all these things are really important to look at, but it's also fun. You could start saying, hey, I used to just go to the gym and I used to do the elliptical and run a little bit and lift weights. But, I feel like I could do a little more for my brain. So some of the better things for the brain is more that functional movement pattern where you're really having to use your core. You're having to pay attention to where your body's in space. If you're in a lunge and you're doing functional movement in a lunge, you're really having to pay attention. What's my ankle doing? Where's my core? What muscles am I turning on? So things like that are really cool to incorporate in the brain. I don't know if Elena is very into exercise. She may have something to add in terms of different types of exercise and things like that. Do you have a preference?
I like to have a variety, so I like to lift weights, but on top of that, I like to do yoga. I think is very, very helpful for me. And then I incorporate a lot of aerobic exercise as well, such as running. And then I like to learn new sports, so I like to try tennis and stuff like that. And I think based off of what you were just talking about, that's right. Probably really, really helpful.
It's very good. Yeah, it's super good. So things that are novel, to learn a new sport is incredible because you're having to learn it new. You have all these reflexes that have to happen, and it's also challenging the brain too. So it creates more of that positive neuroplasticity, and it keeps it exciting. I think sometimes exercise may feel a little daunting. And the more that we can make it exciting, the more it's a lasting lifetime thing. Because it is, ultimately, it's this lifetime choice. Hey, I'm going to work out 15 minutes 3 times a week. And I'm, not the best at that either. So I'm in the boat here. But, these little teeny things make a big difference. Dr. Blake, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, definitely. I think
cool.
When you brought up the point of incorporating new workouts that can be very engaging for the brain as well. I think that's also something super interesting that, especially as you're aging, if you're in the population, because we see a lot of patients that, going into their 60s, 70s, and so on. I think it's so important to keep the workout routine engaging and fun because a lot of times they're like, oh, maybe I don't want to walk, 15 minutes a day, even for that anaerobic component. Yep. So by incorporating, core exercises, and this can be very deep core exercises. You can hold a little weight in your hand and then hold your leg up, and maybe if you want to make it more interesting, you could do it on a foam pad. See that increased, proprioceptive input because you're not on a flat surface. It gives a little bit more. So it's a little bit more engaging for the brain, for your abdominal system, musculoskeletal. So I think by incorporating little changes into your workout team as well, keep it engaging and super awesome.
Absolutely. And that was a really good point. Just made me think about those exercise balls. The cool thing about those exercise balls, some people already use them or they'll use them as seats for work and things like that. But it's excellent for the brain. And the reason being is our midline, which is our spinal. We have our spine, and then we have the musculature that runs along our spine, and we call it midline spinal musculature. It is controlled reflexively through our cerebellum. So our cerebellum, we used to think as just like this balance coordination thing, but it's actually so much more than that, and actually has the most concentration of neurons than the whole entire brain. It's just that little area in the back of the brain. It's really just marvelous, and it does all sorts of different things that are also involved in cognition and emotionality. So you have issues in certain areas of the cerebellum. You could maybe have some psychosis, which just means maybe not as mentally stable, or you have emotional lability where maybe you're a little explosive or a little erratic with your emotions. Or if you have some cognitive issues, sometimes you'll develop what we call cognitive dysmetria, meaning I'm wanting to explain something and all of a sudden my thoughts are not really concise, clear, and they get what we call dysmetric all over the place, right? So before we get to these end stage and cerebellar issues, we have little teeny aberrancies. And the cool thing is we can simply do exercise and get cerebellar stimulation, because it's not only involved in our emotions and our mental sets, as well as our cognition, but it's also really involved with our balance movements. And a cool thing with this exercise ball is you could sit on it, and when you're sitting on the exercise ball, you're all of a sudden feeling, oh wow, I don't feel as stable. And the reason being is you're getting that joint proprioception of your spine. So you could choose to do arm exercises, especially in the elderly population. Sometimes it is harder to come up with cool things that are going to make you more stable, like walking and moving in your environment. Using that little balance ball to sit, really pay attention to where your spine is. You can do little figure eights or different rotation, combine it with different arm workouts, dumbbells, things like that, and work your way up. I'm sure there's other cool ways to use that type of exercise ball, but we're always thinking, how can we activate our core musculature and things that are involved in balancing? You can start to kind of play with that. You could, have your 2 feet together. You can have one in front, one in back, do different balance stuff, incorporate that. And it can be really fun.
So I just wanted to clear something up. You were saying earlier that it's aerobic exercise that helps. What about more so like weightlifting?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So weightlifting is gonna help for a different reason, where you're kind of bringing up the aerobic exercise when it comes to hippocampal mass, and neurogenesis, creating more cell volume within that hippocampal area. And we discussed that in terms of how important it is with memory. When it comes to all these other exercises, especially balance stuff and functional movement patterns, we're looking more at cerebellar activity. To be able to coordinate our body in gravity is a vestibular cerebellar component. Tons of activation there. When we activate that cerebellum, it's going to activate our cortical areas on the contralateral side, mostly, a little bit of so mostly. And then working out with weights is fantastic. We want to combine it though. People unfortunately who overdo it and they're really just uniplanar, like one plane with weightlifting, you'll find that there's more repetitive injuries with that. And there's a reason for that. When we talk about our cerebellum has areas that are going to be activated by uniplanar motion, right? And then it has areas that create something called surround Purkinje cell inhibition. So what it means is and it's going to be a complex movement. So we call it complex movement because it's multi-planes, like a figure eight motion, like I'm doing with my arm. This looks very different than this. And this also looks kind of like dancing or maybe functional movement patterns, things like that are hitting multiple angles and planes of a joint, right? So when we do that, what it allows the information from our joints to go into the brain and be very clear. So your brain hears it, it's activated, and it's concentrated on that area. And it also, what that means, in order to concentrate on a specific body area for the brain, we have to inhibit and dampen down other stuff, right? So for example, if I'm doing complex movement here, maybe I have too much information. Maybe I have a head tilt, too much information from my muscles in my neck, and it's changing the way I balance, and I'm not moving and having reflexes properly. I can do a complex movement if this is specific to my brain, and it's going to help dampen down any extra tone in a different area of the body, and helps the brain pay attention to that area and activate, excitatory burst neurons to that side. So yeah, to answer that, this is fantastic. When we're talking about weightlifting, you're getting joint proprioception. We're obviously building muscle tone, right? It has a whole consequence on the heart that's really excellent to the brain and oxygenation and things like that. Yeah, and so it's I think at the end of the day, having a wide approach to the type of exercise we do, trying to make it as enjoyable for you. Everybody's different, so weightlifting might be your thing, and you decide to say, hey, I'm going to stick with my weightlifting, but maybe I'm going to do some aerobic exercise, run on the treadmill 15 minutes 3 times a week. Those are great choices. Maybe you're like, not into weightlifting, but I really love exercise classes and dance classes and Pilates, and I'm going to do, cardio, this amount of time. So you finding out your, and maybe you don't go to the gym at all. So there's a lot of really cool things, and there's videos on YouTube and stuff that people can watch. But ultimately, movement is so important for the brain. It's not just important for your body. So it's good to utilize it. And it's one of those things where you shouldn't really mess it up, right? There's certain things that maybe you would do at home to activate your brain, and it could potentially mess you up. It could potentially be something that your brain does not need, is not therapeutic, whereas exercise and movement, that's not the case. You can't go wrong with it, and it's very therapeutic for the brain.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't have any other questions. I feel like that was very interesting, so thank you for that information.
Yeah.
I definitely need to work on my cardio.
Yeah, me too. It's a good refresher for all of us. Okay. 15 minutes of aerobic exercise 3 times a week really goes far. Okay. Thank you guys.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of FNT. Please like, follow, and subscribe to our show, and don't forget to check us out on social media. If you or a loved one are seeking treatment, please visit us at precisionbraincenter.com.